Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today something very different for you. We are looking at a recent upcoming aircraft announcement. It's a payware add-on that will be coming to Microsoft Flight Simulator at some point, no release date yet, and it is, as you can tell from the screenshots in front of you, going to be an Airbus A320 built from the ground up for Microsoft Flight Simulator by the new developer team called Fenix Simulations. This was announced very recently, the 12th of July, but I've been taking a bit of time to digest the news and have a look at all the bits of information that have been coming out in the subsequent days. The team at Fenix Simulations have been putting out some great resources and information, including the screenshots that you're seeing here, which are all courtesy of them. So thank you to Fenix Simulations for providing us with those. And what we're going to do today is have two parts to the video. We're going to just talk about some of the information that's come out, and then I'm going to go through some of the screenshots and just pick on a few that I really like and some features I've seen that I'm quite excited about, some details in the screenshots that hopefully will be of interest to you guys as well. So to start off with, this add-on has been announced with, as I said, no release date yet, which I'm sure is everyone's main question. It is going to be an A320 CEO current engine option, not a Neo. It is a CEO using the CFM engines initially. That is the engines you see in these screenshots. It will be getting the IAE engines, which are the engines I often used in the Toliss aircraft in X-Plane 11. The slightly smaller fan blade area, slightly longer style engine. That will be coming later, planned to be free of charge. Amir has already said that. The Sharklet version is something for the future, but is not about to be released at launch. It's something they seem to be considering or working on. I'm not entirely sure. Again, I'm not part of the Fenix team. I must be very clear. So everything I'm saying here is just to give you guys a bit of an update on the news that I've managed to dig out and see from their press releases. There's a lot of information spread out, so it's I thought it might be fun to talk to you guys about it, and I knew you'd all be interested to see this aircraft, being Airbus fans on this channel. The price has not yet been announced. It is a consumer-friendly price, is what Amir has said, but that will obviously be different in everyone's mind, so we are yet to know that. So no clues on that just yet. But it doesn't sound like it will be anything too shocking. Again, that will depend on your perspective on prices for add-on aircraft. It will not be a Neo either. They've made no promise on that. The Neo is for the future, but there's, again, no promise as to whether they'll definitely do that or not. The Neo is not just new engines. There are new software variants, although I'm going to talk about some of that later on in the video about which version they're going for. To create the model, it's been made specially with 3D scanned images of the real aircraft. They've used 5 different airframes, so they've got one of the most accurate representations in terms of distance, geometry, and so on of these aircraft, which has really paid off. You can see from the screenshots, so I'm excited to see that in the actual simulator. On the outside of the aircraft, we're going to see a lot of features in these screenshots, but they've got somewhere in the region of 38,000 indented rivets. So this is something that we're starting to see with this new generation of simulator, where we can have models that are 3D, PBR'd, and also actual indents for things like the rivets without massively hurting frame rates. Previously, these would be textures, 2D images laid over the top, often, not always, but often. We're going to talk about some other features in the exterior model, but something to note for those of you who are here waiting for the Xbox release of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Sadly, this add-on will not be coming to the Xbox. It doesn't sound like it's possible, according to Amir, so it will only be for PC. They're working on 200 livery variations. I know liveries will be a big topic, so you can expect to see more liveries coming to this aircraft when it does launch. But yeah, 200 variations. And they say variations, it sounds like there's the old and new style and so on. So I'm hoping for a few good retro ones in there, but I have no idea. They've gone to quite good detail with the liveries, it sounds like, including different languages if needed for the emergency exit signs, things like that. An electronic flight bag is a very popular feature with flight simmers, and it is planned. It may not be included with the aircraft at release, according to Amir, but it is certainly planned and maybe will be there soon after. They seem to know it's a very popular feature. I'm not overly fussed about the EFB being there if it doesn't have to be. If we can use the MCDU for a lot of equipment changes, loading up the fuel and so on, then I don't need an EFB, especially now we have Navigraph integration. My main use for the EFB is for my charts. So yeah, I'm not overly concerned about that actually. But yeah, it sounds like it's on the way, which is great. Which brings me on to the next point, which is there will be some different variants. So you can, for example, brake fans are included, but apparently they're working on having those to be selectable on or off, and things like fuel and payload as well, all through the MCDU. So I don't know how far or how extensive the MCDU will be able to be used to change these features, but that will be really, really quite nice. Typical sort of flight simulator quality of life feature, that. It's going to be using the EIS2 system, so that's those flat LCD screens you can see. It doesn't have the EIS1 system, the old CRT style. Now that sounds like quite a simple thing to include, but actually they're incredibly different in terms of the geometry of the displays, as well as the symbology and the way the display management computers work. They are working at a very high level with this add-on. We'll talk about systems shortly, but they're looking for a really, really detailed system setup to be one of the most, if not the most complete Airbus simulator out there on the market. So for that to happen, they want to do it properly, and that obviously means that you can't have a half-baked EIS1 system. It needs to be the real deal, and there are some differences that need to be accounted for. So that's not planned at the moment. Thrustmaster TCA Officer Pack, or the Airbus add-on pack as we know it, or the Airbus throttle quadrant and side stick that I've shown on the channel before and what I use for flying, is being worked on for compatibility. So it seems like the development team do already have some and are working on it and are talking to Thrustmaster. So hopefully we'll see that come out in the future as a complete sort of setup, because a lot of us now have the Airbus Thrustmaster kit, and I'm sure more will be getting it in the future, especially to fly this aircraft. They are working for a system level which is really quite unprecedented. We're going to have GPS working fully functioning MCDU, all of the auto flight modes working, the flight control computers working. So we're looking at the ELACs, the SECs, all of these things all working properly. So yeah, it's an incredibly high fidelity aircraft. The final few features I want to talk about here in the first part of the video is that there will be failures. There is a failure list available in the original release on their website where they talk about this. I'll provide a link in the description. But yeah, 383 failures apparently, which is going to be quite remarkable. Also, 280 circuit breakers are simulated, which is more than enough. Now, the failure list is important to talk about because it's not just that the failure will stop a system from working, it will actually have the knock-on effects on the other systems and the ECAM, and that's clear. So it's becoming a really, really detailed failure model, which is going to be really, really interesting because we can have some good fun with that. And we have seen some of that before, especially with the Toliss A320 and X-Plane. We've had good fun with some complex failures, so I'm looking forward to trying out some more as well in this aircraft. Finally, something I'm excited about is the terrain and weather radar are expected to work, and there is going to be a screenshot later of that terrain radar working. So I'm very excited to get a hold of those and have a go. What I want to do now then is move on to some screenshots and talk about a few things that I found interesting about them. Okay, so first of all, here is the shot that a lot of you will be familiar with. Chewy did a great stream with Amir where they talked about a lot of these features, and this screenshot was shown at the start. It was sort of the introduction to this model, and yeah, it looks absolutely stunning, and there's a reason for that. In my mind anyway, the thing that stands out to me the most is the wings. If we look at the wings, they are really nicely textured with all the different panel colors. And then you can see the grime running along the trailing edge there on the flaps. So they've worked hard, according to Amir. They've really, thought about where the dirt and grime would accumulate. This is going to be a service aircraft, so you're not going to have a brand new, completely immaculate aircraft. The cockpit as well shows that. We'll see that later. So it's quite clear that they're going for a level of real life grime, but not excessively. So this is very common, sort of this light grime coming off the trailing edges of surfaces and so on, or any sort of ridge line. So you can see here along that panel on the wing. Now the top of the wing is not something I see very often, funnily enough. We do our walk arounds underneath. The time we see the wing most is when we're looking out the windows to check for any ice that could have built up, in particular above the landing gear. But yeah, really nice to see the different colors. The spoiler panels are a different sort of metal, different reflection to the main wing. Funnily enough, the top of the wing comes in. I've seen all sorts of versions in different real-life Airbuses. So yeah, it's interesting to see they've gone for this shiny metallic one, which is one I've seen very often, and there are other ones that seem to be all sort of slightly different shades. It's quite remarkable. But yeah, that's the big standout feature for me there, and you can see again this nice texturing on the sun when we get to the tailplane. So to be clear, I am just looking at this as you guys as well. So I don't have any special information for you. I'm just talking through the pictures to give you my perspective on it. So yeah, really nice to see those wings glistening. I can see why this screenshot was selected for the release. Here we go then underneath, and what I like about this is we have here the air conditioning pack outlets. We've got the underneath beacon, and all sorts of, there's loads of exhaust and grimy bits underneath the airplane here. This is actually one of the dirtiest parts. Quite regularly you can see sort of old bits of hydraulic or excess fluid and things like that. But some nice details to pick up on are the streaking back from here. You can see this line. We have the dirt running backwards from various panel lines, which is again very common on the underneath of these aircraft. What I also like is if we come forward, we can see the cargo door. A bit grainy here because I'm zoomed very far in on this screenshot. These were captured, I believe they were captured on a 1440p monitor, but rendered at 4K. But anyway, there we go. So we've got the grime running down from the cargo door. But look at these antennas, all in the right place. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, there's plenty of spikes to hit your head on as you walk around. This is the drain mask for the forward sink. So it has a big warning on it because it's hot, because it has to be heated so that water doesn't freeze as it drains out the bottom of the airplane. So if you're doing your walk around and you walk under here, this could just pour hot or cold or soapy or water or coffee or whatever onto you. So you don't want to be standing behind that drain, that's for sure. Something I have noticed, and I'm going to talk about it in a few screenshots, this little panel is open here. Now, I didn't see this talked about yet, and I haven't spotted it in any videos. We haven't seen too many videos from the Fenix team. But if we look here, and then let's move on to the next drop. We look here, we can see it's hanging open. Now, I believe this is the access door for the GPU unit and the APU, there's a little APU control there, and it's how we can plug in a headset so the ground crew can talk to the pilots, and it all plugs in through here. You'll see whenever a GPU is used on an Airbus, it'll have a little hook, and then the cable will sort of loop over and plug in up under here. So yeah, really interesting to see it open. I haven't seen it talked about, but it's, as far as I can tell, I was trying to make sure I wasn't looking at a window or something, but comparing the two screenshots, it seems to clearly be there. So that is really good news to me. Just a nice little detail I've not seen modeled, or not seen talked about yet. So there you go. We've also got the texturing on the engine here, the sun glistening, really nice. They've clearly got the exterior model sorted. Rubber as well on the tyres looks great. And here's the brake fans. This is the brake fan version, but it sounds like that's going to be optional. They've modeled it with and without brake fans, and you'll be able to see the difference. The wheels do look different. It's not just an internal thing. They actually change the style of this sort of hubcap when there are and are not brake fans. So yeah, there's a spinning blade that blasts air onto the fans, and you do not want to get your fingers caught in that, no way. But yeah, tyres looking really nice, very clean. Same for the grime running backwards. Just to show you again, another from this same sort of angle, here's those tyres looking absolutely brilliant. As we go forward, we can see that little panel open. And here's another tiny detail that I'm really excited about. That is the inlet for the air conditioning that feeds the avionics bay. I say air conditioning. The air is drawn through there. External air is drawn through there. So it drawn in there, blasted out the other side. If you see an A320 pilot doing their walk around, when they're around about here on the right hand side of the fuselage when facing forwards, you might notice them get blasted with air and their high-vis jacket flap all over the place. That's because the air is drawn in and sent through the avionics bay and blasted out the other side. Very noisy. If it's to temperatures within certain range, these doors will actually be closed, but very often they're open, certainly in Europe sort of temperatures. So yeah, so it looks like that's been modelled and is partially open there. So that's quite neat to see. Not something you see very often modelled on external models. So I hope that is going to be a working feature to see that on the exterior. Very trivial in some senses, but it's, I don't know if I can see it. Here's that panel on the nose gear, or sorry, the little ground service panel hanging open as well. So yeah, really exciting, really nice. This is interesting as well. We've got all the different textures showing all the different sort of metals, and it's always amazed me the amount of different metals on these pylons. This sort of big round circle is the cover for the fire extinguisher squib, a little fire extinguisher bottle that could fire into the engine. So it's it's that slightly different metal. I don't know why. That's just how it's been designed. But yeah, they do look like that. They look like they're pieced together like a big jigsaw puzzle sometimes. Even though of course it's all very carefully designed. I'm sure there's a reason behind every different panel. Over here, the ram air turbine door, it is serviceable. Ram air turbine does work. That's been confirmed by Amir and Chewy on their stream, so that's good news. And you can see they've clearly modelled it. So yeah, no surprise there really. This shot was used at length in the stream where Amir talked about it. But something I liked about this shot, again, we have the different metals over here. Mainly, I like this little panel here. this covers up the slat extension retraction mechanism. Now, when you do a walk around on the Airbus, it's always stood out to me. I don't know why, this isn't a particularly interesting feature of the real aircraft, but these cover up their little panel and they tend to stick out a little bit. They sort of do, they are more noticeable than you'd imagine. Everything on the Airbus is so carefully and flash and fit together when you look at it. All these lines look just like this, really, really neat. It's an amazing piece of engineering. But these little panels have always struck me as odd because they stick out into the air slightly more than you'd imagine they would compared to everything else. And as a result, look at this, we have the dirt and grime coming off it exactly as you do on the real aircraft because, like I say, they are out and in the way. So yeah, really, really fun to see those looking so prominent on the external model. I mean, it's just incredible level of detail. Final external picture then I want to talk about for now is this wing view. Just nice to see. For those of you who've been only using the A320neo in Microsoft Flight Simulator, you won't be aware, but the in-flight speed brakes don't operate in all at once, and they don't operate at the same amount all at once. There's actually, if we look at the actual speed brake and ground spoiler panels, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this fifth one in here, which is flash at the moment, this one wouldn't come up in flight ever. These are roll spoilers out here, which we do use for roll obviously, and then we got our in-flight speed brakes effectively. Now it does depend on the aircraft which ones are used for roll, but this is a 320, so obviously they've got it absolutely right. And we've got these inboard 3 here, and they don't come up all the way. To use them fully, you have to actually disconnect the autopilot. You only get half deflection of the speed brakes in the 320 until you actually take out the autopilot. It's just to do with the way the autopilot interacts with the aircraft with the speed brakes at full. But there we go. It's nice to see the correct panels coming up and at different angles. Now, I want to be clear, nothing I'm saying today is intended as a criticism of any other Airbus. We've got loads of great Airbuses. It's just great to see the level of detail being put into this one as it's coming through its testing. I don't know when it's going to release, but it's really, really nice to see. And this is just, I thought, an interesting tidbit for those of you who've only ever used Microsoft Flight Simulator. You may not be aware that we don't actually use all of those panels all the time. Yeah, this is more of a typical in-flight view of a speed brake extension. Obviously, it's time to hop inside the flight deck now. Again, these are all publicly available images, so you'll have seen these. But what I want to talk about is just some of the nice details we've seen. So these scratches and so on these panels are all very common. This is all very hard-wearing plastic in the aircraft, except for this glare shield, which is sort of squidgy, and they've really, really captured that nicely. But you'll all be familiar with that. What's nice is the texture detail here. We've got some wear away below the master caution. This airplane's had a few additional presses of that master caution button. Something to note is the Airbus does silence cautions very well. In some aircraft, they don't actually silence the cautions, and I've talked about this in previous videos. What I mean by that is the Airbus doesn't give you a master caution when you turn the engines off when you park on stand, because it knows you're parking on stand and you want to turn the engines off. There are some aircraft that every time you turn the engines off after a flight, it will give you all the warnings as if the engine's failed. And those ones have huge amounts of paint missing around these buttons. But the Airbus is very good. So it's a bit more subtle. You can see the master warning's basically never been pressed because it basically never goes off unless there's a real issue. The master caution button's been pressed more regularly because we do get occasional faults and there are reasons we have to press it or cancel warnings or warnings that we're already aware of, for especially if we're flying with an MEL item. What I mean by that is, say something's failed on the aircraft, but it's okay, we can travel with it, the checklist allows it, then we may end up getting cautions throughout the flight at certain phases. So that's what can cause this button to be pressed quite regularly, creating to this wear. So that's really, really fun to see. Other things you got over here, springers for the pens that you hold in there. These last about a week as far as I can tell in the real aircraft before they ping off or fly out or somewhere. So yeah, that's quite fun. The screens, they're working on the grime and dirt. It doesn't sound like Amir's happy with it yet, but I think it looks very good, but they're trying to still working on this. I want to be very clear, these are all alpha pictures, so if you see anything wrong, it's all in an alpha, so it's not a released product yet. So yeah, not much else to say, but yeah, few nice details I wanted to pick up on in this picture. So here we are now with a screenshot of the lower pedestal. Now this is an interesting one because it's got our ground spoilers, flaps, rudder trim, parking brake and so on. But some nice details on here that Amir has already talked about on the stream with Chewy, but we've got embossed text, so it's sort of indented into the panels, which is great. and really accurate wear. I'm especially pleased to see this panel. It's a bit of a mystery to me. I assume it's because pilots rest their hand on this when they use it, but this is where. So this is where the paint, the blue paint, has worn it down and shows that green primer. Very common color in aviation. You see green primer on lots of aircraft. Often it's anti-rust paint. Whether that's the same reason in the Airbus, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not an Airbus engineer, I'm afraid, but we do have a few in the community who could probably answer that. But anyway, yeah, very common to wear down to green underneath. You see it on lots of different panels that get a lot of regular use in the aircraft. So pilots using the speed brake in flight, to make sure we don't forget them, we often leave our hand on it, and the result is your hand sort of rests and fingers and rings and so on will scratch down here. So that's what's caused that. The rudder trim as well, Amir was saying that they've actually made sure they know what's underneath the paint and the wear is accurate to the aircraft as opposed to just sort of random wear. Now this switch is used almost never in the real aircraft, so you might be wondering why it's so worn. Well, the problem with this switch is it's in between two things we use all the time. In fact, four things we use all the time: engine masters, speed brakes, parking brake and flaps, and also we press this button every flight to reset the rudder trim. This is mainly used, in fact this is only used really with an engine failure. So yeah, it's very rarely used, but it does stick up and it's in the way of all these other controls we use a lot, so it's going to get knocked, and that's what causes it to look a bit rougher than it would otherwise. So yeah, great to see that modelled. You can see again that green showing through here on the control down here. The weather radar, I noticed, is an older style radar, so that would make sense given that this is a CEO aircraft, not a Neo, so it's not the brand new one, which is a very fancy system. It's a slightly older style. There are several styles out there though, so just because we've all seen different radars, this is one with multi-scan and GCS, so it's quite a nice one actually. But yeah, we've also got the predictive wind shear. Transponder as well, it's interesting to see which one they've gone for. These are just different variations of transponder and weather radar. These are the two most common things you see different actually as a pilot. There's all sorts out there. I did ask Amir on the Discord, are they basing this on a specific airframe, or are they making up their own sort of fantasy A320? And I say fantasy only in the sense that it's just a generic one. And he said that they are looking at making a sort of a general average of an Airbus aircraft. So these are all realistic panels, they are all real ones, and I'm certain somewhere out there is an Airbus that looks exactly like this with the same fit, but there are so many variations. Obviously you can't have all of the different variations, so yeah, we've got this combination, which to me makes sense straight away, because this radar panel and this transponder were around at the same time, which is great to see. So a few more cockpit panels that are worth showing you. What I like about this one is the detail on the radio management panel. This is how we change frequency. The top one doing the numbers on the right, the big one lower down doing the numbers on the left. So obviously heavily used, wears out quite a lot. So yeah, that's a nice little detail there. You can also see when we go up onto the lower ECAM display here, you've got the inlet outlet valves open. Those are those valves I was talking about earlier, the air conditioning. So it's nice to see those are shown open there, and they seem to have been open in those earlier screenshots, which is quite exciting to me. But yeah, that's just one of those things. The MCDU looks absolutely fantastic, of course. We're going to talk more about that. But one of those nice details from Microsoft Flight Simulator is just getting these reflections. Look at that. We got a reflection of the DCDU shown down here. Now that brings me on to another thing that Amir has talked about. Will we get CPDLC and DCDUs operating in the real aircraft? Well, he said that they're aware of it, they're looking into it, and it's being investigated, so it's on their radar. Doesn't sound like it's currently fully functioning, but it sounds like it could be possible at some point. So yeah, that may be something we see. This, for those of you who don't know, is used to talk to air traffic control when we use it's like a data link system where we can send them, or they can send us a request or a demand, and we can then answer it all using this screen. And it means that we don't clog up the radio waves by talking, because obviously only one person can talk at a time on the radio waves. So that is something that should be coming, always being looked into. Whether or not we actually get it, who knows yet. Let's move on to the next one. So this is the FCU, and this is a great screenshot. What I really like about it is it shows off some of the ergonomic design of the A320. I've often talked about how impressive it is in the A320 that you can choose a new flight level, select it, tell the aircraft to arm and level off there, and also choose your mode for going up there, all with one switch, or using, for example, this altitude knob here. So it's a clever piece of design. There's some great features here as well. What we've got is, this is our speed control. This is our vertical speed control, and you can push to level off, obviously. This is our altitude knob, and this is our heading knob. And they're all different ergonomically for a reason. What's funny is this is 3D scanned, as we talked about earlier, so these are incredibly accurate representations of the switches. But I've never actually looked at the heading knob from this angle. I mean, you don't really stick your head round to the right and then look left across the FCU very often. But it's funny to see how clearly differently shaped it is from the switch next to it. Now, you do notice this when flying. It is designed so that you can't accidentally, or you should notice if you've got your hand on the wrong switch, because they all feel different. But that's just really, really funny to me to see it like that. I've never noticed that was its sort of cone style shape. So there we go. This indented FCU screen looks absolutely lovely with the reflections on it. Really, really nice. Also, of course, good amount of wear on the pull for standard, because we use that every flight several times. So they will be naturally very well worn. Something that's usually incredibly worn on the aircraft is this EFIS control here. These switches are used endlessly, and if there's ever a switch that won't have paint on it, it'll be these. Sometimes these are worn right through until they actually glow. The light behind all these panels, which you can see is working in this add-on already, but yeah, it glows through these, and sometimes the paint wears off so much that they're just sort of sitting there like glowing translucent plastic little switches. But there we go. Yeah, I thought it was nice to see the detail shown along this FCU. So we've looked at some of the great eye candy. Let's have a look at some of the systems that the aircraft's already got, just to show you the level of detail it sounds like they're working towards. Here we have something that a lot of you won't have seen before, which is the backup speed scale. This is a system, again, on modern A320s. So they're clearly going for a really well-equipped, it's one of the last non-sharklet aircraft, I would say, if not one of the last CEO aircraft to be this well-equipped. I would be surprised to find a wingtip fenced A320 with all of this equipment, but that is a great way to do it for Flight Simulator, because I think it gives you more options, more flexibility with the aircraft you've got, because you want to have all these features there. Why wouldn't you? It's just nice to have. The bus is a great feature. Crucially, this is, the bus does exist on, I'm sure it exists on non-sharklet, but it definitely exists on CEO aircraft like this. It's not exclusive to the Neo. The Neos have a reversible bus, so there's actually a little button here, which would not be here on the CEOs. But what this is a backup speed scale. So if you turn off all the data computers, instead of just losing all your information, what you actually get is this. It's based off angle of attack and GPS, as you can see. It gives you a rough altitude using GPS altitude. And Amir has been very, very proud of the GPS implementation on this aircraft, which we'll talk about in a bit. But there are some errors with GPS, and that will be accounted for when you load up this GPS altitude, which is really remarkable. But yeah, this is a way of flying the aircraft we haven't got any static ports working here. We haven't got the pitot tubes working here. But the airplane can fly safely like this. And if you go into this area, you're too fast, this area too slow, and it's based on your angle of attack. Very, very neat system used on the newer Airbuses. As you can see here, as I said, all ADRs have to be off for this. So this is an ADR 1 + 2 + 3 fault, and it tells you how to fly. You can see there the ECAM even telling you probe window heat on. It's trying to make you override it in case there's some reason they haven't heated up, and you might be able to melt the ice off. And it says speed, fly the green. Again, we're going to talk about failures with this add-on when it comes out, I'm sure. But yeah, fly the green as in stay in this area, please. That's what it's asking us to do. So it's great to see the ECAM implemented with the instructions, because I cannot imagine the size of database you have to go through. And it's been the same with the Toliss A321. The remarkable work the developers have gone into of both of these aircraft to have these ECAM listed correctly. Really great. And here's a good reason to use that master warning button for this. Definitely a serious enough fault. Let's go on to the next one then. This is the pixels. Again, you've all probably seen this by now, but yes, if you zoom in on the PFD, you see the pixels, and this is spot on. This looks exactly like it does in the real aircraft. And then you've got the specks of dust and so on. These screens are incredibly staticky after a while, so they do pick up every bit of dust, and then the sun shines across them, and you'll see it all. So yeah, absolutely spot on as far as I'm concerned. We often get given paintbrushes, or different airlines have different ways, but there's wipes, there's paintbrushes, there's all sorts of ways to do it to sort of just brush off the dust. But what you don't want to do is use a normal sort of disinfectant wipe, because you'll just smear the screen. It'll look absolutely terrible. Moving on, here is the backlight bleed demonstration that they've provided. So this is really interesting. totally accurate to the real aircraft again. Of course it is. I mean, I don't know if you guys want me to say all this or not, so you tell me what you think of this video. It's just me talking through it, and I might do a few more of these as news comes out, but these are just some features I haven't seen before, which is why I'm quite excited to talk about them. So yeah, if you put the eCam or any of these displays, the same over here, up to full brightness, especially at night, you'll get this sort of bleed around the edges. Very common. It varies on aircraft to aircraft, but it is there always. These screens have to be incredibly bright, but they're obviously LCD screens, so they've got to be incredibly bright for the text with black background. So you get that bleed effect because, of course, LCD, they're not OLED, so they're not just lighting up these pixels. But yeah, they do look like this. It's not so prominent straight on. At night, quite obvious. EIS1 screens, the old CRT screens, are a little easier to get darker, whereas these ones don't get quite as dark, and they have this, I don't know whether that's official or not, that would just be my opinion on it, but yeah, you can see the bleed more obviously, especially at full brightness, but if you look straight on, it's no longer there, or it's much more subtle. Sometimes, I noticed in the real aircraft, you sometimes see it increasing, getting slightly worse and better again, and I have yet to figure out why, and I mean over a period of maybe seconds, like 20 seconds, it sort of fades in and out. Very strange, but yeah, anyway, there we go. That's all been added in there. Next, we have the TCAS. So this was released in one of the press releases or on their website, I can't remember where, but maybe on the Discord as well. But this is a automatic TCAS. Now this, again, is a feature usually seen on the Neos. So as I said, this is a highly equipped CEO aircraft. I'm sure you could retrofit this. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident anyway you could retrofit this to your CEO if you wanted to. But as you can see, it's flying the TCAS. The autopilot is still in. They've got a TCAS resolutionary advisory because of this traffic, 500 feet below and climbing. So the Airbus has decided to demand that they climb. In the old days, or on the CEO aircraft, typically we would take out the autopilot, take out the flight directors, and fly that vertical speed into the green area. But with newer aircraft or this automatic TCAS, you can actually do this, where the TCAS mode engages and the Airbus does it itself. It's remarkable. What it's especially good for is any reversion. So pilots can quite easily fly into the green initially, but what's slightly more challenging is when it then demands a reversion. So it might go from green and then it might say, actually, I want you to descend. Things like that, which can be quite startling to pilots. So it's nice to have the autopilot able to do it. And yeah, this is a real feature, obviously. And there's that traffic out there showing that the TCAS is working, but also this extra mode. So this is a really nice Airbus to have. Finally, then, we talked about the terrain radar earlier, and here it is shown. Now, those of you who are used to Microsoft Flight Simulator's terrain radar will be aware that I've often said that the terrain radar in Microsoft Flight Simulator, I think it looks too good. I've never seen one as good as it because it shows perfect lines and it's all very smooth. This is what a real terrain radar looks like, to me anyway. What we're seeing here is the sort of areas of terrain. You've got the lowest displayed terrain is at 1,600 feet and the highest is at 11,400 feet. It's not very clear. You can't tell exactly where that 11.4 is. You can't tell exactly where the 1,600 is. What it is it's just a representation. Now, the aircraft knows very well exactly where it is compared to every bump and ridge and obstacle and skyscraper. It's a huge database. It's incredibly clever. But it doesn't display it to us. You can't fly using this chart, this map, for example. You're not allowed to fly through this valley. You've got to use the procedures, the VORs, everything else. This is purely here as just a backup for situational awareness to give you an idea. So if you see you're going to fly right off into the red, you might need to think about doing something different. Finally, then, the exciting news we got from Amir in a post, I believe yesterday or the day before. By the time you watch this video, it could be a few days ago. But we got a bit of a deeper dive into what the MCDU is capable of. What features will it have? Now, I know a lot of you will have questions like, will it fly holds? Will it have VNAV and all of that? And basically the answer is yes, it pretty much has everything, and it has more than you'll be used to, and certainly more than you'll need to fly very, very happily around on VATSIM and so on. So let's have a look at what we've got. This is the required time of arrival feature. Again, this is all available on the Fenix website, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but just to show you, if you haven't seen it, what sort of things we're talking about. So this is where you can put in a time you want to be at a waypoint. So we want to be there at 14:25. You can see at waypoint Lasno. The reason you do this is because then it will update the cost index and it can actively make sure you get there at the right time. Why would we ever have to do this? It's actually quite rare. It's mainly an oceanic thing. So you'll be cleared to enter oceanic airspace at a specific time and Mach number. The reason air traffic do that for oceanic is because the idea is you're going oceanic, you're going out of radar control area, so they need to separate the aircraft when they all enter the airspace and then keep them separated throughout the flight. So if you arrive there 30 seconds, or not 30 seconds, let's say you arrive there 5 minutes early, that could be that you're just too close to the airplane in front. So that's why it's done like that. So that is simulated, which seems really nice. Here we have the init page, and you can see it's got AOC active flight plan uplink. So this is important. There is SimBrief and Navigraph integration already available in the alpha, so it will be there in the release, which is really, really exciting to have. And you can see it's uplinked. Now, different airlines do this differently. Some will have it uplink into the primary, some in the secondary, and they seem to be still working on where that's going to go. But yeah, so that is clearly available there, which is great to see. And if we look over on the right, just a little sneak there: simulator, fuel, passenger cargo, data link config, controls config. So that's great to see. Seems like it's all going to be accessible through the MCDU, which is nice. You'll notice up here we have the doors page, so that's clearly functioning very well. Total air temperature, static air temperature, and so on, all represented as you'd expect. Nice grime down on the metal floor panels, which is spot on, of course. They're always filthy. It is possible to download the weather, and here you go. Here's an example of it. Slightly different formats to what I've seen before, but there's loads of different formats out there. So yeah, they're going to be adding that, which is great to see already. Approach via, so you can just load in the star, all simulated. And notice up here as well, this is a cruise ecam page. So we've got the cabin altitude and then the different temperatures. Now 25, nice and warm in the cockpit. But yeah, that's great. And here we have the total air temperature, static air temperature, and ISA deviation. So compared to the international standard atmosphere, it's 10 degrees warmer. Just an idea, it affects your performance. Here we have equi-time point, so you can figure out exactly when you're going to be halfway between two places. Now, you might wonder why. Well, it's not just a distance thing, because if you're, say there's 100 miles between these 2 points, I know that's not very far, but if it's 100 miles between the two, you might not be halfway in terms of time because of the wind. So if you've got a strong tailwind as you're flying along, then it might mean that if you needed to turn around and go back, you'd have to actually do that quite quickly for it to be the same time as carrying on, because that tailwind would push you towards your destination. So that's what the equi-time point does. These are all features we're going to look at on the channel in the future, no doubt, when we get our chance to get a hold of this aircraft. Oh, moving on. Here you go, fixed info page, all functioning, which is what allows you to draw these circles. We've seen this before on the channel. We use it a lot in the Toliss. This is to build good situational awareness. So you can draw arcs around waypoints, the distances, you can put radials in, and this is for flying into, obviously, as you can see, this is the Funchal approach. So yeah, you can have it all loaded in, which is really nice to see. Over here we have the FLS system. I have a video on this recently on the channel where the Toliss added it in version 1.3, and here it is already working in the Fenix Sim. So it's got F approach. This is the FMS style of approach. So it does a double magenta diamond. Yeah, so it's great to see that already added in, and you can see more sort of range rings. And up here we've got the VOR needles all functioning. Very good, very good. Now I want to talk about offset, which is something that's been included. Just again, I'm just showing you some features that Amir's kindly put up on the website, but this is used when you're oceanic. What it's used for is there's a thing called a strategic lateral offset procedure. Now, I don't fly much oceanic, being a European pilot. I often fly in lots of radar coverage with lots of air traffic control. But what this does is, and you can see it here, offset. If we move to the next screenshot, you can put in left 5, and then if you insert that, what you'll see is it draws you left 5 miles left of your track. Now, why do we do this? Well, when we're oceanic, the tracks that we're all flying are far apart from each other, so we can sometimes offset ourselves a little bit depending on the procedures in the local area to give better separation from each other on the same track. Might help avoid wake turbulence, that sort of thing. But there's a specific order and direction and amount and when you can do it. Another reason would be for if we're looking at avoiding weather, things like that. So if there was a nice thunderstorm sitting here, we might want to offset to the left to get around it. So yeah, there's all sorts of procedures, but great to see that already working in the MCDU. And there you go, there's the end of the offset where it moves back in to the point, and then there's the top of the descent arrow. So all clearly working at a very high level already. Here's a screenshot where you can see clearly lots and lots of lines and arcs drawn in. That's a proper Airbus style approach navigation display. You can get all sorts of great pictures out of it if you work really hard. But yeah, it allows us to know, we'll know, for example, the safe altitude in each of these areas, and it makes it very clear to us whether we are in those areas. So this is a feature that Amir was very proud of, and I can see why. The satellites are all simulated in the sense that it will know where they are. And what that means is there could be poor GPS coverage in certain parts of the world at certain times. Something we'll do before we fly an RNAV approach, or an approach that requires GPS to be used, because the GPS feeds into our navigational system to help with accuracy. And again, this is a whole massive topic we can talk about when it's released. But basically, you have lots of satellites, they all move around, and there could be periods of low coverage. So when you have high coverage, what you get is a thing called Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring, or RAIM. So if you have RAIM, then you have a well-equipped GPS system that can tell where you are, and it can back that up and check that it's not suddenly gone wrong, or one of the satellites isn't feeding false information or something like that. That's my basic understanding of it. Again, I'm not qualified to talk about GPS properly. But here we go. This is showing us that we've got a good amount of satellites and expected coverage for our arrival -15 all the way through to +15. So this is our ETA, and then it does it either side. So we'll check this before flying an RNAV. If there's a NOTAM or some reason a certain satellite is not suitable, then you can actually deselect it. Not something I've ever had to do actually, but yeah, you could deselect it there, and that might help the situation. But there you go. So that's been modeled, which is great to see. And you can see that you can actually put it for your destination and a specific waypoint. So I'm arriving at Echo Papa Kilo Kilo in Poland at 14:57, so it does our monitoring there, but also at the waypoint along the route. For example, if we wanted to divert in, we're going to get there at 14:10, so tell me, do I have RAIM when we get there? And it says yes. Step altitudes are clearly modeled as they've shown here. It says no optimal step, so I'll be really excited if it lets us put in a random flight level, and basically what you can do on the real aircraft is put in, let's for example say 360, and it will tell you when to do it. It will say when the best time and most efficient time to do that is, accounting for wind and so on, which I believe is all modeled. So I'll be excited to see if optimal step climbs are featured as well. But yeah, that's already working in there, as you can tell. Here we have a wheel page, which is quite good. They've got, again, a well-equipped Airbus because it's showing the PSI. Not all of them do that. A lot of them will just show the temperature. It depends if you want to pay for that to be shown on the eCam. But yeah, it's a well-equipped one, no doubt. So that's all modeled nicely. I saw in one of the videos, this little hydraulic panel showed correctly the self-test and so on after the gear was put down. So that's all very nice to see. And if we come down here, we've got the takeoff performance, and it says CLK is takeoff time. I think that's CLK. What it's talking about is it's time for us to get going because of the required time of arrival feature that you can use to tell the aircraft when you want to arrive somewhere. So it will actually tell you when you need to get going. It's quite clever. We'll use this if we have a slot or something. Let's say our flight is massively delayed and we're actually running out of hours where we're allowed to fly. What we can do is you can tell the aircraft, well, I need to arrive at a certain time to be within hours, and then it will tell you when you need to go. And that's a very clear way to say, right, well, if we see that it says it's takeoff time now, and then air traffic says, sorry, you've got another hour delay, then maybe it's not going to work out that day, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a really interesting feature. Last couple of bits now then. Here's the position monitor page. We use this a lot. We mainly use it after a flight to check that the aircraft is understanding where it is. So you've got different IRS positions. They're showing at 0.3 nautical miles away from each other. So we've got the two FMGC positions, which will also have the GPIRS position, and then it mixes them all together to give an actual aircraft position that it can use. So this is all simulated. Amir's confirmed that. So this will drift as the flight continues. They won't all go perfectly together. So you might finish, if you did a really long flight, you might find one of them says 3.8, one of them 2.5, and this sort of thing, random sort of numbers. And it seems to be all simulated, which is really great. The longer the flight, the worse that drift can be. If it's over a certain limit, after we land, we'll actually check it and see if there's a problem with that system. You can select Navade, so if you know something's broken, you might deselect it. For example, if a NOTAM says a certain VOR won't be working, you could, or it may be transmitting false information, maybe you'll deselect it in here to make sure it doesn't feed faulty information into your navigation system. But yeah, very clever, very robust, as ever with the Airbus. The phrase, my favorite phrase, capable, very capable. Here's closest airports, useful if you have an immediate emergency. Great to have this here. It shows you the distance and the time of arrival that you're expected to get there. The only caveat to this is you've got to be very careful because some of these will be surprisingly short runways, so you need to make sure you know where they are and what sort of approach they have. There's no point having a massive failure of all your systems and then diving in somewhere just because it's close but with terrible weather. You'll waste all your fuel anyway. So yeah, it's a nice page to have. It's something useful, especially as you go further out over the water. So that's all for today's video. I hope it's been interesting for you. This is just one final shot that they've kindly shown already. This is a great view of the wingtip. This is exactly what it looks like when you look out over your shoulder. You can't actually see past the wing much. You can actually only just about spot some of the speed brakes if they come up, but you'll notice along the leading edge here you've got this different change in texture on the slats, which is exactly right. These out to 3 are heated, but anyway, all to be talked about in the future. But I hope the video has been interesting for you. Let me know what you think. If you want me to keep you up to date with news on this this project, we've seen some interesting details in it already, which has been quite fun to talk about with you guys. So I hope it's been interesting for you. No doubt we'll be talking about it more as time goes on the live streams on the channel as well, and certainly when we get our hands on it we will be flying it on the channel. You can imagine that. It's clear that this project is going to become a big part of the 320 SimPilot channel. It just fits right into our market of being an Airbus flight simulation channel. So it's very exciting to see, and it's going to, just like the Toliss and the fly-by-wire A320, it's going to fit into our streaming and our simulator world quite nicely. I'm very excited to see more of it and see some of these features arrive. As I said at the start, no release date yet, so we'll just sit tight and keep hoping to hear more news, and I'm sure they'll be feeding us some more sort of media and bits of information as time goes on. But do please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more information about it. When it comes out, I'll be doing all sorts of guides and tutorials, I'm sure, as well as live streams in it to get the most out of it and hopefully help you guys get a better understanding of what it's all about. And there's clearly some extra level of depth in the systems here that we're going to have to go into to really get the most out of this add-on. So very exciting time, definitely. That's all then. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you again in another live stream or video soon. Do please keep safe and well. Bye bye.